must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us this afternoon. About 3 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in today. And of course, on the show, we get to bring you the latest news from the continent of Africa. And we shall start our news this afternoon with a breaking news from South Africa, where F.W. de Klerk, the former president of South Africa and the last white man to lead the country, has died at the age of 85. Mr. de Klerk, who was also a key figure in the nation's transition to democracy, had been diagnosed with cancer this year. A spokesperson has said Mr. de Klerk was head of state from between September 1989 and May 1994, and in 1990 he announced he was releasing anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela, leading to multi-party polls in 1994. And then he head over, still staying in Southern Africa, this time in Eswatini. Nurses from various public hospitals across Eswatini's capital, Bambane, have protested against food and drug shortages. This is according to local reports. Privately owned Eswatini Observer tweeted that nurses and other staff of Bambane National Hospital held demonstrations over the shortage of food and other challenges at the health facility. Leading privately owned Swaziland news website based in neighboring South Africa quoted the Secretary General of Swaziland Democratic Nurses Union as saying that a known number of patients had died of starvation and lack of drugs. It is not yet clear what has caused the current shortage of drugs at public hospitals. Eswatini has, however, recently brought to a standstill by pro-democracy protests that began in the tiny Southern African kingdom in July. Health workers have also been part of the rare protest that called for a major constitutional reform, the release of 2 pro-democracy lawmakers, as well as an end to Africa's last absolute monarchy. And we head over to Benin, and a ceremony has taken place in Benin to mark the return from France of 26 royal treasures that had been looted by colonial troops in the 19th century. This follows agreement between the two countries that was finalized on Tuesday in Paris in an event attended by President Patrice Talon and Emmanuel Macron. Among the artworks which had been displayed in a Parisian museum are statues from the ancient kingdom of Abomey, as well as the throne of King Behanzin. It was looted when French soldiers ransacked a palace in 1892. And then we head over to Nigeria, and the latest is that Bruce Fein, the American lawyer of IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, has threatened to drag Nigeria to the International Criminal Court over alleged gross violations of his client's rights. Fein was in court on Wednesday following the trial of the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, but was denied access into the courtroom. Speaking with journalists after the proceedings, Fein intimated that yesterday was the 5th time he was being denied access into the courtroom, despite the court's previous order that Nnamdi Kanu could have access to any 3 persons he wanted to accompany him to the court. The lawyer now says that he will petition the working group of arbitrary detention in Geneva, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the ICC in The Hague, and take the matter to the United States Congress, calling for sanctions against Nigeria for gross violations of fundamental human rights. And then we head over to Mozambique. Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi has sacked the National Defense Minister Jaime Augusto Neto. It comes just a day after the president fired the Interior Minister Amade Makwedade. The president has not explained why he has fired the country's top defense and security leaders. It is believed that the decision has to do with increased cases of kidnapping, murder, terrorism, and corruption, as well as rising number of road accidents. Some of the cases have involved members of the defense and the security forces. Observers have called on President Nyusi to explain his decisions to avoid public speculation, fear, and disorder. They say it's not normal to sack 2 top security leaders in days, and that there must be a good reason for it. And Then the latest from Ethiopia. The United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says he is hopeful that diplomacy will work to end the war in Ethiopia. He said he had been in contact with the African Union Special Envoy, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, as well as the U.S. Regional Envoy Jeffrey Feltman. Mr. Blinken also said he had spoken to Ethiopian Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen and emphasized the need to seriously engage in negotiations on a cessation of hostilities without preconditions. He expressed concern that the words coming from both sides of the conflict risk inflaming intercommunal violence. He hoped the negotiations for a ceasefire would allow humanitarian aid access and later to negotiate a more durable political resolution. It follows Tigray's rebels' a recent advance towards the capital. And the government has been asking residents of Addis Ababa to mobilize and protect their neighborhoods. And then we head over, still staying with an accident, a crash that happened in Ethiopia. And the latest is that Boeing has reached an agreement with the families of the 157 people who died in Ethiopia's 737 MAX crash in 2019. The plane maker accepts liability for their deaths, according to court documents in Chicago. In return, families of the victims will not seek punitive damages from the company. Lawyers of the victims' family said Boeing would still be held fully accountable, welcoming the agreement as a significant milestone. Boeing shares fell 1% to $218 on the news. The agreement opens the way for the families outside the U.S. in countries such as Ethiopia and Kenya to claim compensation through the U.S. courts rather than in their home countries, which might be more difficult and result in lower payments. And then we head over to Cameroon, and at least 11 students have been injured after an explosion in an amphitheater at the University of Boya in the restive southwest region of Cameroon. The students had gathered at the venue for a peace concert. Unidentified men were seen at the university before the blast, according to Ngono Horace Manga, the vice-chancellor of the university, who said that security would be strengthened at the institution. Education institutions have been targeted by separatist groups who are fighting for the independence of the Southwest and Northwest English-speaking regions, otherwise known as Ambazonia. What began in 2017 as protest against discrimination in schools and courts against the majority French-speaking population has morphed into a separatist movement, as well as splinter militia groups targeting schools and other public areas. According to International Crisis Group, at least 3,500 people have been killed so far in the past 4 years. And then we head over to Senegal, and 2 opposition politicians have been arrested in Senegal. The 2 Senegalese opposition figures were arrested as violence broke out over a high-profile court case involving one of them. Police officers in the capital Dakar clashed with supporters of Barthélémy Diaz and Ousmane Sonko, who are both strong critics of President Macky Sall. Hundreds of people accompanied them to the appeals court for hearing on Diaz's conviction on a fatal shooting that took place in 2011. He has accused the authorities of sabotaging an attempt to run for city mayor. Earlier this year, at least 12 people were killed, even as violence broke out after Sonko was charged with rape. He said the case was aimed at blocking a bid for him running for presidency in Senegal. And we end our bulletin in Somalia, and a 15-member team of the African Union Peace and Security Council met with senior Somali officials in Mogadishu on Tuesday and discussed the future of AMISOM peacekeeping operations. Tensions are running high after the Somalia government expelled an AU deputy special envoy last week. The federal government of Somalia and the African Union peacekeeping mission AMISOM have been at loggerheads over proposed reconfiguration of the 14-year-old peacekeeping force. Under the proposal, more countries would send troops in Somalia to join the 20,000 already contributed by 6 AU members. The Somalia government is against bringing more foreign troops into the country. Meeting with a visiting AU delegation in Mogadishu on Tuesday, Foreign Affairs of Somalia Minister Mohamed Abdul Razak said the government rejects the so-called hybrid option. Ambassador Mohamed Gad of Egypt, who led the delegation from African Union headquarters, reiterated the Continental Body's commitment to enhancing stability in Somalia despite the differences over the mission. Last week, Somali officials expelled an AU Deputy Special Envoy, accusing him of activities incompatible with the mandate of the African Union mission in Somalia and the country's security strategy. AMISOM was set up in 2007 to help the Somalia government withstand the threat posed by militant groups such as the Al-Shabaab. The mission is operating under a United Nations mandate that runs out on December 31st, so just a couple of days away. So that is the latest from the continent this afternoon. Of course, we started with the breaking news of the last white president in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, who has died at the age of 85. And of course, we remember in February 1990 when he delivered the speech in the country's parliament announcing sweeping reforms that marked the beginning of the negotiated transition from apartheid to democracy. And the reforms lifted the ban on the African National Congress, which had been termed as a terrorist group, exactly what IPOB has been termed now there in Nigeria, so ANC as well, and what the TPLF had been termed in Ethiopia. So ANC at that time had been termed as a terrorist group. It was proscribed. And so after this, a historical speech that de Klerk made in 1990 in Parliament, the ban that had been imposed on ANC was lifted, and other anti-apartheid organizations, and authorized the release of political prisoners, including Nelson Mandela at that time. And it also put moratorium on the death penalty. Ephraim Owauma, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know where you're watching me this afternoon. I'm coming back to the Biafran story just in a short while, but we do have a breaking news in the continent this afternoon, and that is the death of the last white president in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, who died at the age of 87. And of course, he was born in Johannesburg. He studied law and practiced law, and then after he joined the National Party, to which he had family ties, he was elected to Parliament and sat in the white minority government. And at that time, that was being led by P.W. Botha. Do you remember him? Okay, if you've watched enough apartheid movies from South Africa, every time they play him, you'll see somebody playing him, and you can understand better the history in South Africa as far as apartheid is concerned. And at that time, the government was being led by P.W. Botha, and holding a succession of ministerial posts. As a minister, he supported and enforced apartheid, a system of racial segregation that privileged white South Africans. That is what Botha did. And remember, F.W. de Klerk came to power after Botha, I think in 1989, if I'm not wrong. And that is after Botha resigned, and de Klerk replaced him first as a leader of the National Party and then as a state president. Although observers expected him to continue Botha's defense of apartheid, de Klerk decided to end the policy. I think he was very aware and very sensitive to that time and the agitation of black South Africans wanting different and calling for making calls to end. So can you imagine being in your own country, like right now here in Kenya, and then you have some foreigners coming here and deciding, okay, you can't even use this washroom because you're Kenyan and you're black. All right, this is meant for. Can you imagine how that would, felt like for the indigenous people in South Africa? That must have been really horrible. And we've seen the effects of that are still lingering when you see how South Africans still act out here, and the kind of trauma they exhibit sometimes. They've still not gotten over that very hard period in their lives. And so that is what Botha did. But when F.W. de Klerk came in, he was expected he will follow what Botha had done, but he seemed to have had a different way of leadership. And I think he was sensing, if he didn't do things differently, and then, the black South Africans are going to rise against the government, and this time perhaps he will not be able to contain them. So He was aware of that growing ethnic animosity and violence was leading to South Africa into a racial civil war. Amid this violence, the state security forces committed widespread human rights abuses and encouraged violence between the Xhosa and the Zulu. That's how they say the Xhosa. I can't do the click. That's usually they say it. The tribe of former South African leader, is it? I think Mandela came from that community and the Zulu people. Although de Klerk later denied sanctioning such actions, he permitted anti-apartheid marches to take place, legalized a range of previously banned anti-apartheid political parties, and freed imprisoned anti-apartheid activists, including Nelson Mandela, who had served a good 27 years a term in jail. He also dismantled South Africa's nuclear weapons program. Now, de Klerk negotiated with Mandela to fully dismantle, apartheid and establish a transition to universal suffrage. Okay, one man, one vote. That's it. And in 1993, he publicly apologized for apartheid's harmful effects, but not for the apartheid itself. And so because of that, he's been a very controversial figure. And I think also both, I think there's a time he was, I think, making some presentation in some world forum. And he expressed that he didn't think apartheid was that bad, Yes. And so he oversaw the 1994 non-racial election in which Mandela led the African National Congress to victory, and de Klerk's National Party took second place. De Klerk then became deputy president in Mandela's ANC-led coalition, the Government of National Unity. Now I see where we got our own Government of National Unity, what we had here after the 2007-2008, post-election violence. I think we must have copied that form of governance at that time, which helped in bringing the country together, at least at that time. Now, in this position, he supported the government's liberal economic policies, but opposed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission set up to investigate past human rights abuses because he wanted total amnesty for political crimes. Look at that, without shame. And then his working relations with Mandela was strained, although he later spoke fondly of him. In other words, he was saying, I know we killed you, I know we segregated you, and of course the systems in South Africa, there are places you would go that you can't even find a black person living. Like there are areas that are still very segregated in that regard. But de Klerk said as much as, okay, fine, we're going to have a black president and all that, but there's no need to form a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because, see, we are good now, so you could just forgive everything and sweep everything under the carpet, and it's all roses and peaches, and everything will be fine. And so Mandela, of course, refused, and we saw the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was formed to try to look at and see how South Africa would come together as this big rainbow country, and I don't know how that has worked for them. But Mandela formed that anyway, so I think at that point marked the departure of them working together, Mandela and de Klerk. I remember when Mandela got the Peace Prize, he shared it with de Klerk for his efforts of bringing in change and helping to end apartheid. So FW de Klerk was also honored in that regard when Mandela was being given his Nobel Peace. They shared it together. And in May 1996, after the National Party objected to the new constitution, de Klerk withdrew it from the coalition government. The party disbanded the following year and reformed as the new National Party. And in 1997, he retired from active politics and has since then lectured internationally. Yes, he's been giving lectures about good governance. And de Klerk is a very controversial figure, as I have mentioned there earlier. He received many awards, including what I've told you, the Nobel Peace Prize, earning wide praise for dismantling apartheid and bringing universal suffrage to South Africa. And conversely, anti-apartheid activists criticized him for offering only a qualified apology for apartheid and for ignoring the human rights abuses by state security forces. Meanwhile, some far-right white South Africans accused him of betrayal and abandoning apartheid. So he was caught in the middle. But I think the changes that he brought had to happen at that time. So we're looking at, the breaking news, and that is the death of the last white president in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, who has passed away at the age of 85. And we know that Mr. de Klerk, who was a key figure in the nation's transition to democracy, was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. And the family spokesperson says he died very peacefully in his sleep. So just a very short history there of de Klerk, but this is still a developing story. So perhaps tomorrow, God willing, when we come back here, we will have more news on that. So in other news that we've had this afternoon, some news from Cameroon that is very disturbing. So some students in a university where that is the Anglophone region had some, I think it was some event that was happening. So while they were sitting at an amphitheater, an explosion happened and 11 students were seriously injured at the Boer University in the Anglophone region of Cameroon, specifically in the southwest region there. And the students had gathered at the venue for a peace event. Can you imagine? You're gathering from a peace event, and then before you know it, something is exploding and you're trying to scamper around and save your life. Unidentified men were seen at the university before the blast, according to Ngomo Horace Manga, the Vice Chancellor of the university, who said the security could be strengthened at the institution. They better, because that is not okay. And education institutions, as we know, have been targeted by the conflict and the different groups that have been operating in the Anglophone region. And what began in 2017 as a protest by teachers and lawyers when Cameroon, was insisting that the whole of the country will be using French as the official language, and teachers and lawyers started to protest and saying, no, in the Anglophone region we speak English, so we don't even know French, we don't speak French, so we can't teach in French, and we can't go to court and argue cases in French because we don't know French. And that, sparked some protests that have continued so many years later. And according to International Crisis Group, and this is just the numbers that could be counted, there's so many other bodies that nobody can account for, that about 3,500 people have been killed in the past 4 years. And I think from the reports we've been receiving, I think it's more than that. So that is also another situation that, is worrying there in Cameroon. And in Nigeria, okay? No, before we get to Nigeria, fine, related to Nigeria, we make a stopover in Ethiopia, right? We know there's a crisis there too, an active conflict that has gone on now for over a year. It started last year on the 4th of November, so slightly over a year now. And the U.S. is actually expressing confidence this time on that former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, will do well. Because, remember, African Union appointed him to be a mediator in the conflict in Ethiopia between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF that has now been joined by other forces to fight the federal government. So U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken expressed concern that the words coming from both sides of the conflict risk inflaming intercommunal violence, but he said that they are hopeful that former president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, will do a good job there. So they're waiting to see what he'll be able to come with there from Nigeria, from Ethiopia. And the latest from Nigeria, remember yesterday Nnamdi Kanu was taken to court. I don't know how long that session lasted. And there are people who were refused access, were barred from accessing the courtroom. And one of them was one of his lawyers from the U.S. His name is Bruce Fein, and he is an American lawyer, and he represented, and he represents Nnamdi Kanu. And now yesterday he was also one of the people who were blocked or barred from entering the courtroom. So now he is threatening the government of Nigeria, and is saying that he is willing to drag the Nigerian government to the International Criminal Court over alleged gross violations of his client's rights. And Fain was in court yesterday following the trial of leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, but was denied access to the courtroom. So now he was speaking to the journalist after, of course, he was barred from entering the courtroom, and he's saying this is not the first time he was being denied access. He's been counting 5 times now that he's been denied access into the courtroom despite the court's previous order that Nnamdi Kanu could have access to any 3 persons. Remember, yesterday Nnamdi Kanu was allowed only 2 of his lawyers, Ejimakor, and I don't know if I can say the name, I will not even attempt, but I think that one I've said right, but 2 of his lawyers, right? And so the 3rd one, the court said no, the 2 are enough, but there's a court ruling that allowed Nnamdi Kanu to be accompanied by at least 3 people in the courtroom. So he was denied, and he's saying that is not right. So now he's saying that he will petition the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention in Geneva, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and the International Criminal Court in The Hague also, and take the matter to the United States Congress. And when he does that, he's seeking to call for sanctions against Nigeria for gross violations of fundamental human rights. So let me just read, verbatim what he said yesterday. I'll just quote him. I had the chance, when he was speaking to journalists, I had the chance to talk briefly to him on my way to the courtroom. It is clear that I am the target in particular. That's the reason why this proceeding did not transpire today. That was yesterday. So he's saying the reason why the proceeding did not take place, I think it was very short. He's now saying it's because of him, because he was present. But if he was present, but he was denied access to the court, so how did the proceedings not take place because of this lawyer? His name is Bruce Fain. I don't know how you feel about that. Perhaps you do have extra information about this. And you're saying his name is former Attorney General of the U.S. Okay, thank you, Mwoka Ekuchuku, for that. Thank you for that extra information. So now, give me more information that you know about these proceedings that happened yesterday, that everybody else was kept out, the media, some Igbo elders had also wanted to come in, some activists, all of them were barred, and only 2 lawyers were allowed to go in with Nnamdi Kanu. And these are the lawyer from the U.S., was also barred from accessing the courtroom. So he continued to say that I am here to tell Nigerians and the international community that I'm taking this to the international tribunals. It is clear that the Nigerian tribunals are compromised. I'm here not to be an irritant, but there are huge international law issues that are present in Nnamdi Kanu's case. I'm here because I'm an international expert to provide more enlightenment on what legal issues are present here. Enlightenment, Nigerian government will never allow that in its courts. I don't think so, okay? I do not think the Nigerian government will allow itself to be enlightened in any way, especially those courts. Remember, before even these judges that now are listening to this case, there are a few of them who had recused themselves or refused to hear this case. All right, several times before, until now we have this one that is listening to this case. And so he's saying he'll take the federal government of Nigeria to the ICC, to the International Court of Justice, and he'll make this matter known to the U.S. Senate and call on sanctions against Nigeria for violations of fundamental human rights against the indigenous people of Biafra's leader. So I think we'll wait to see how that will work out, and if at all he will make this threat good by following it up. Okay, so that is also a story that we are following up for you. So 15-member team of the African Union Peace and Security Council met with senior Somalia officials in Mogadishu on Tuesday. Somalia has been insisting that it's about time all foreign forces in its country left the country, and there has been tensions between Somali government and the AU, because remember it expelled an AU, a deputy special envoy, last week. And the federal government of Somalia and the African Union Peacekeeping Mission have been at loggerheads over a proposed reconfiguration of the 14-year-old peacekeeping force. So for right now, there are 5 countries that have contributed their troops to Somalia. I don't know if I can remember them. That would be Kenya, Uganda, Djibouti, I think Burundi, and Ethiopia, I think. All right. So they are there in Somalia. And Somalia has not been comfortable with some troops from other countries, and that will include the troops from Kenya, and now from I think Uganda as well, and Burundi, I think. All right, so Ambassador of Egypt, who was there to mediate this, who led the delegation from African Union headquarters, reiterated that the continental body is committed to enhance stability in Ethiopia, in Somalia. I don't know how that has been working. African Union, have you been able to really achieve that stability in Somalia? What are the timelines? What has been happening? Yeah, because you were supposed to be out of Somalia by 31st of December this year, but you know there has been an extension which Somalia has opposed. And last week, Somali officials, as I said, expelled the deputy AU envoy, and Somalia government is asking some troops to leave Somalia. Under the proposal, some countries would send troops in Somalia. So under this new hybrid proposal that is being proposed by the African Union, the hybrid option, one of the proposals is to send troops into Somalia from other countries to join the already, which are there, the 20,000. But Somalia was asking, could you scale down on the troops? And so there was a disagreement on that. Somalia was saying, you know, they were not adequately consulted and they were not in agreement with that. So that is that. All right. Okay, so Somalia seems to really try to tell the world that it can actually take care of its affairs, and Somalia wants to be left alone. Maybe you should just leave Somalia alone and just perhaps support them from a distance. I don't know if that will work, you know, because if a person keeps expressing their discomfort with you being in their house, you can't keep staying there. Maybe it's about time, because the world has tried, AMISOM has tried, KDF has tried, UPDF has tried, other troops from other countries have tried. And maybe we should just give them what they want. We just let them be, and then we just sit back and support them from a distance. I don't know if that will make a difference, but that is what they seem to be wanting. And then we see how that will work out for them, because we can't insist on helping somebody that does not want your help. You know, if your help is not welcome and your stay is not welcome, you just pack and ship, I think. And then we see how that will work out, okay? All right, very well. So that is what we have from you, for you this afternoon. That is all I had for you. Thank you so much. Moaka, you're saying the fact remains that Nigeria wants the Biafrans to be the first to declare war, so they will have reason to execute in full military might like they did in 1967, I think. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and hopefully we'll see you here tomorrow, God willing, for more news from across the continent of Africa. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Bye-bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.